This week on the Marianne Hickman Show features a wonderful, just beautiful human. I met her actually through a mutual friend, and we went to an event together, and I was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I'm shaking the hand of Rachele Brooke Smith because I follow this girl on Instagram. I'm a super fan of her work. And when she agreed to come on the podcast, I was stoked. Now, here's two things you're going to learn on this podcast. Number one, how you embody a persona when you're speaking from stage. Rachel's an actress. She's been featured in films for quite some time. And that character, that persona, also plays a part when you're speaking from stage. So listen in with those ears. Here's the bonus that I wasn't even expecting that I was stoked about. Her and her husband, Emilio, are amazing relationship coaches. I've seen, I'm getting goosebumps just talking about it. I've seen some of the work that they do. I'm jumping into their universe, in fact, a whole lot more. But listen carefully for the relationship building advice that they have, not just for speakers, but for entrepreneurs. I'm excited for you to check it out. We'll see you in the show. So we are live streaming this amazing podcast with the one and only Rachele. Thank you so much for being here. We've got it's exciting weekend coming up.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
I'm so excited to just talk. Like I told the kids, I was like, I have a movie star coming over today. So be impressed, right? This is so cool.
Thank you.
You've got a lot of really cool things going on right now. We were just chatting off camera about a couple premieres that you have coming up and lots of projects that you're working on. You just moved to Utah.
Yes.
Like all of these things going on right now that you're kind of, tell me about what life is like for you right now with all of this going on. And then Emilio told me off camera, another thing in your family that's going on. I don't know if you want to talk about that, but.
Oh yeah, entering into a whole new chapter of life.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, this is such an interesting, beautiful chapter in our life. But first of all, I never thought I'd live in Utah, like ever. So this is a very big surprise for me.
And where are you from?
Originally I grew up in Phoenix, but I moved to LA when I was 18, just really following my dream of being an actress and a filmmaker.
Yeah.
And I don't know how I did it. I didn't know anybody. I was terrified. It was one of the hardest things I've ever done, but also one of the best things I ever have done. So, but yeah, somehow, some way, I ended up making that dream happen. And, my kind of crazy manifestation story of actually playing the lead role in the sequel to the film that changed my life as a little kid, center stage. And that was really, still to this day, I have to actually watch the movie to remind myself that, yes, that actually did happen. That wasn't just a dream, because sometimes it really does. Like, I question, when you get those places when you just start to doubt yourself or question your talent or your worth or your value, all that stuff. And not that I've had to learn the hard way that a success and achievement does not equate to your worth. But sometimes, especially in the entertainment industry, it can get really confusing.
Yeah, what's up? Marianne Hickman here. Hey, listen, I'm about to give you my phone number, so write this down. 801-509-5495. I want you to text me. What questions do you have about the stage or getting on more stages or getting on podcasts? What questions do you have about monetizing your message and bringing in clients? I want to help you make money with your message. So text me 801-509-5495. Let's chat. Because your job is, your income is so tied to someone's opinion of you.
Yeah. And
right?
Actually, this brings up a really deep conversation. We'll go right in real fast.
Let's do it. Let's go.
I was having a hard time recently, struggling, especially as transitioning into okay, we want to start trying to have kids. We want to go into a whole new chapter of motherhood and fatherhood. And especially in moving to Utah and having all these fears about wait, am I going to become like a boring Utah mom? Or I don't
have a Stanley for you if you need one. Have extra.
You're dealing with all these kind of identity crises of no, I'm a California girl. I am in film and TV and just all this stuff that was so all ego stuff that I was causing so much of my own suffering. But it was also one of the most beautiful experiences I've been through, because for a while when we first moved here, first it was really exciting and we're okay, we're making our dream comes true. We're building this awesome production company here in Utah with some of our best friends and business partners. We're in a place where it's way more affordable and just great people, just so many incredible things, but I couldn't see it, if that makes sense. At first it was very exciting, but then all of a sudden I had all this fears and doubts and insecurities and stuff come up. And especially when it was cold and snowy, and I've never lived somewhere where it's cold and snowy.
When did you move to Utah again?
In February.
In February. It's the dead of winter. If you can make it through that, it's going to be smooth sailing.
Well, and I am solar powered. So I have learned through this move that I'm just very, very, very affected by weather.
You know what? It's crazy. And a lot of people are like, don't talk about the weather. It's boring. But I'm like you. I'm like, I talk about the sunshine that I get all the time.
Yes, it absolutely changes you. I mean, maybe if you grew up in it and you're just used to it, but for someone that I grew up in Phoenix, Arizona, and I lived most of my life in Santa Monica, California, by the beach, like it's just always sunny. So it's a very real, but again, I look at everything in life as like, it's just contrast.
Yeah.
Maybe, for me, what's helped me is not really thinking of life of like, oh, this is good or bad. Like thinking makes it so. And how I can change my story or my perspective about the meaning that I'm associating with something and realizing, and I think honestly, that's what helps me so much. I learned more about personal development and growth and transformation from being an actress than honestly, maybe anything else in life.
Yeah.
Because you're constantly in this state of trying to master yourself. Like your whole body, your mind, body, soul is your instrument. And so when this stuff comes up, whether it's in a scene or whether it's something to do with dealing with the body image issues or the beauty issues and what I was starting to get at was something I was really struggling with was getting older as a female, especially in the entertainment industry.
Right.
And not just in general, I think getting older as a female is just hard in general because our society is so based on looks and
It's so true.
beauty.
We were trying to look for some stock photos of grandmother.
Yeah.
And like you look up grandpa, there's a good billion.
Yes.
And we look up grandma and there's like 2.
That's fascinating.
Isn't that
And it
crazy?
doesn't surprise me at all. Like it, and we were, I think this topic isn't talked about enough and it's so important. And I was messaging some of my mentors that I go to when I'm really struggling. And I was like, I am really, really, really struggling with this. And some of my friends too were also struggling with the same thing. And Emilio had noticed I was really struggling with this. And he, I'm so grateful to be with a partner who just speaks life and love.
He's a
back
total
into
rock
me.
star.
He is a rock star.
And then that, like the first 15 minutes of watching you guys get out of the car and come to the studio, I was like, oh my gosh, you can feel their coherence and their synergy and their support of one another. It's really, and like we're gonna do a part 2 and have Emilio and you.
Yes, that would
On
be so great.
like since the studio is done, we're gonna do a part 2. I know already, but
Oh,
like
thank
I
you.
admire that. It's
Oh,
palpable right
thank
away.
you. Thank you. We work really hard for that. I also feel that with you and your husband too. So that's really, really cool. And it's why we started our brand Relationship Renegades. We just wanted, we wanted to protect ourselves and make our life about something that would help us like proactively protect and talk about relationships, learn about relationships, put ourselves in a space where we had to like, not had to, but it almost was more important. Prioritizing that relationship was almost more important because of what we were creating, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I think if you create a fitness brand, you're way more probably going to be into fitness. If you create a health brand, you're probably going to be more into health. And so, in creating like a relationships wellness brand, it was just a very conscious decision. But yeah, I told him, I was like, I want to do a whole series of videos of people hearing this man that has worked so hard to be the kind of man that he is, that is way more conscious and intentional and about way deeper aspects of life than just the physical or just society's facade. And he just spoke so much life into me. He's like, babe, I love the like wrinkles on your face. I can't wait. When you're 80, I'm going to love you even more. And all those wrinkles tell a story. And imagine what it was like, in a native, more in like different tribes or different cultures that really respect age and respect wisdom that comes with it. And they're like celebrated and put on pedestals as opposed to our society that just kind of like throws them the walls. And so, I don't know, it was still hard for me, but he was helping me rewrite some of these narratives that are so deeply ingrained in me, as I have struggled a lot with a lot of body image issues. And even though people would look at me and be like, okay, you have a six pack.
That's what I was just thinking. And the audience would looking like, really?
And
for real?
I love talking about it because, and I've worked with some of the people that I think like A-list celebrities, millions and millions of followers, millions and millions of dollars, the most beautiful people you'll ever meet. And they too probably struggle more than other people that I've met. And it just blows my mind that this is not it really, like, yes, it has something to do with what you look like, but also it doesn't. Like, it's just a human problem. And I think especially if you're in front of a camera all the time, if you have to be in front of mirrors all the time. I grew up a dancer, so I was constantly
You're on stage constantly.
Well, and you're in front of a mirror and you're literally in a space where your entire world is about what you look like. And this was the biggest epiphany, because I was like, Emilio, are you not struggling with this at all? Like, you don't struggle with like getting older or like body image stuff? And he was like, a little bit, not really. And I had this down, and I was like, wait, my entire life, like ever since I was probably 6 years old, because I started competitive gymnastics when I was 6, I have been celebrated, gotten attention for, rewarded for what I looked like and how I performed.
Mm.
And I was like, oh, no wonder why I'm struggling with this.
Because that's your everything.
That is, like, I realized that he didn't ever have that. He got celebrated or rewarded for how intelligent he was, or how smart he was, or how much he was able to do in business. And of course, like, I've had that too, but it's been such a focus on the opposite. And so, yeah, it was a huge epiphany. So it gave me a lot of like grace and compassion. And even for him to realize, because he was like, I just don't get why you're struggling with this so much. And then when I shared that with him, he was like, oh, I get it now. And I see you in that, and how hard that would be. And that alone just, I think, was very healing.
Thank you for hearing me and understanding me. Oh my gosh. You ever see that video? It's not about the nail.
That's one of my favorite videos.
I love that. All my sweaters are snag.
We literally we recreated our own little like spin on that video. And honestly, that video was what I was like, I want to create these, because it was so powerful for me. I think I sent that video to like thousands of people.
Yeah.
And so much of what we want to do with Relationship Renegades is creating these kind of comedy sketches that have these deep principles, where people can watch the comedy sketches, but then also where we deep dive after into these deep conversations of all the layers into that.
Oh, I'm so excited to just feast upon that. Oh, you sent it to me today, and I was like, I didn't even know this existed. This is so cool.
Thank you.
And it's really important for my husband and I. We've been talking about this a lot within us.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just talking with Chad Brown, who we did a podcast together, and he was talking about how he coaches in business. And he said, people think that I do business coaching, and I do, but when we start working together, the first thing I ask about is, how is your home life? Right? How is the dynamic between the two of you? What is that like? Because that translates into your company. And companies are going to come and go. I mean, Richard and I have several companies that have risen and have fallen. And at the foundation of it all is what's here.
Yes.
What's with us.
100%.
And you guys are doing that too.
Well, and that was a really hard lesson for me to have to learn, and why it's such a pain to purpose story, because my whole life I was running on the narrative of that I didn't know this, but I was. It took a lot of deep inner work to find it. Was that the more I achieved, the more I would be loved and accepted and successful. And that drive to prove myself, to achieve, and then with that story, the more I achieved, the more I felt like, oh, I got love. But the hard thing with that narrative is that, one, it's very lonely, because when you're on that path, or you have that story driving you, friends would invite me to go to lunch, and I'd be like, I can't go to lunch with you. Like, I am busy. Like, I am working. And I would even judge those people of like, don't you have like things to do? Like, or just like, you got to like make stuff happen in your life.
Yeah. Aren't you hustling?
Aren't you hustling? So it also, I lived in a ton of anxiety and fear all the time, because I felt like if I wasn't achieving a lot, then I wasn't good enough, or I wasn't worthy of love, or all those kinds of things. And so it created a lot of toxicity in my relationships, all my relationships. And I wondered why I was struggling in all of both like my family and friendships, but also my boyfriends that I had. And it took me a lot of time to realize that even when I was working on these really big films, dream come true roles, it was amazing in the moment. Like, it felt so incredible, and I was so grateful for them. But I was so lonely, and I felt so unsupported. And I had a really hard wake-up call from one of my best friends to this day. She was actually one of my maids of honor. I had two. But she, at one point, she would often invite me to these like game nights that she did with friends. And we actually met on Bring It On. And after a while, she just kind of stopped inviting me. And at one point, I was like, hey, I just haven't heard from you in a while. Like, are you still doing game night? She's like, oh yeah, we just stopped inviting you because you're kind of a bad friend. And I was like,
said that?
Yeah, but it was like,
wow, good for her.
It was, yeah. And to this day, in the moment, I was so like enraged and hurt, and like, how could you say that to me? But
Of course.
I've talked about this all the time. That was the wake-up call I really needed
Yeah.
because it was such a powerful reflection. When I really looked at it, I was like, oh, I'm not being a good friend. Like, I was really flaky. I would, like, last minute not show up for things. Like, I wouldn't attend game nights or lunches or dinners because I was always, like, too busy doing other things. Which in my mind at the time was like, no, that's what I'm supposed to be doing. But then that wake-up call was like, wait a minute, I am not that I don't want to be that person. I want to be a good friend. And what does that really mean to be a good friend? Um, and kind of hearing these different quotes is like, if you want to have a good friend, you have to be a good friend.
Yeah.
I honestly, it changed my whole life. And then it helped me realize I really wanted really great friendships and I've always prayed for that, wanted that. I never felt like I had good girlfriends growing up. I always felt like they didn't like me, or that I was kind of, my mom even called me like a wanderer growing up. Like, I was just always kind of like on my own, like doing my own stuff. And, for a while I thought that was so cool that I was like that. But then I realized I'm like, no, this is lonely stuff. Like, I don't want to be like this. And I realized that no matter what you achieve in life, if you don't have great friendships and family or like soul family or intimate partner relationships, like, it doesn't. It might feel good for a moment, but then it's a hard wake up call. It's not fun.
So what happened after that? She called you out on the carpet.
Yeah,
Honestly.
I mean, honestly, I made some big changes. I ended up, after being mad at her for a while, I called her and I was like, "Thank you so much for waking me up to this." And then I completely changed my behavior. I started prioritizing all my friendships. I started like going to all these events and not so much I would, if it was work or friends, I would have to really question my decisions of what I was doing and just prioritizing my relationships and friendships and making time for those things and realizing they were so important, honestly, was what changed everything. And even opened the door to all this work too, even in my intimate relationships, because I had just toxic relationship after toxic relationship with different boyfriends. And I would always go through these like soul crushing heartbreaks because things would get so bad, so bad. And they would just like blow up in my face. And I got to a point where I was just like, I am so done with this. Like, what is happening? And I would always blame them. Like, it's their fault. They have jealousy issues. They have trust issues. They have anger issues. And then the real wake up call was when I finally was like, I am done with this and I want to change. And I had been studying manifestation and psychology and personal development my entire life, pretty much ever since I was 14 when I saw the first center stage. But I had this epiphany. I was like, wait, like, I've studied all this other stuff, but I've never once really studied how to have good relationships. No wonder why I'm struggling with them.
Probably should have read a book on this or something.
Yeah, and of course, personal development kind of talks about it, but it's not the same as if you're like really studying like intimate partnership. And as soon as I did, I just went to every workshop I could, worked with every coach I could, read every book I could, and mostly it was the hard wake up call that it wasn't about them. It was really like my stuff. And
that's always the hardest wake up.
Always the hardest wake up call.
And like, oh shoot, that was me. But
it's always our, we have a comedy sketch called How Triggers Are Gifts. Anytime we're triggered, this deep understanding that triggers are just really beautiful gifts wrapped in really ugly wrapping.
But thank you.
No, seriously. And most of the time, like 90% of the time, if we're super triggered, it's usually something within us. And as soon as we like unwrap all that ugly wrapping paper through doing the work, you find this beautiful gift, and all of a sudden that trigger is not resonant anymore. And so when I learned that actually these guys didn't have, I mean, maybe they did they had their own stuff. It always is like two people, but I had honesty issues. So of course they would have trust issues because I was being fully honest.
You're like, shocker.
I show up everywhere. Yeah. And of course it usually always goes back to childhood. And I, had this really hard thing I had to unravel of, I never really felt safe telling my dad the truth growing up. And so I learned this behavior of like, it's not safe to tell men the truth. And I ended up torturing both of us because I was too scared to be honest, even though it might hurt them. Because before I was like, well, I can't tell them because it'll hurt them, or I can't tell them because then they won't like me anymore, or they won't love me anymore. And that just ended up in so many toxic situations.
Even becoming aware of that phrase, though, is
Yeah.
such a huge milestone.
It was
That
massive. Yeah.
self-awareness, because I've been through this myself. I'm like, oh my gosh, why is this so toxic? It's because I had this belief that was totally hidden in the shadows. It was a blind spot for me. And once I
Yes.
realized that was the operating system, I was like, oh crap, everything makes so much more sense.
So much more sense. And it's just this freedom. Once I learned that, and I think, at least in my experience, what I've learned is you can understand something logically, but it's very different for your nervous system and your whole emotional body to lock it in and change your behavior.
Yeah.
And so for me, I really did, like, in the time, I think I had about like 7, like, really unhealthy, great, actually good guys, but it just led to these really unhealthy relationships. A lot of because of obviously my stuff and their stuff. It was just the healing journey. And in that chapter, I would always pray. I'd be like, why do I have to go through this? This is so hard. I don't get it. Like, don't you love me? Like, kinds of questions. And lonely and heartbroken and depressed and couldn't get out of bed. And now, though, I am so grateful for all those experiences. Like, they were the greatest gifts because I have this deep, 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 deep appreciation for my relationship with Emilio, my relationship with my friends and my family, because I had so much contrast. And I really believe that's one of my greatest superpowers is that deep understanding. Because even when I'm so mad at Emilio sometimes, or I'm so mad at my friends or my family or whatever, I'm like, wait a minute, like, this is the greatest gift. This is the greatest gift. And oftentimes I think I've also become just so aware that life is so fragile, especially after losing several friends from different things. Tomorrow's just not promised. And so many times I end up worrying about all these things that ultimately, if I was really, if I didn't have tomorrow, I wouldn't be worried about them.
Wow.
And I think that constant practice of, even when I'm looking at people or in these deep moments, really realizing that, like, hey, they might not be here one day. They won't be here one day. I won't be here one day, and probably in the blink of an eye.
Oh,
And so,
that's
like,
hard.
and so, like, am I really appreciating today? Am I actually really enjoying this gift of life that I've been given? And my dad's a doctor, and my whole family's in medicine, so I'm very aware of all these stories of people who are literally on their deathbed fighting for their lives.
Sorry, that's my. We just got a follower, probably. It's the Instagram account.
Hi, thanks, guys. But yeah, so I think I'm also very grateful for that because, yeah, life is just such a gift, and even in the hardest times, this deep appreciation for life and for the gift of life and the miracle that it is. Like, if you can walk or run or dance or play or see or touch or hug someone, like, oh, that gift is amazing. And someone right now is literally in the hospital praying with every fiber of their being to just have another minute of that. And so I try to remember that on a regular basis.
And I'm so glad he went there, because when we first started chatting, we were talking about age and how we're like, I don't like that it's showing.
Yes.
But at the same time, we always pray for another day, right? So there's, like you said, there's this contrast of, I want every day. Every day is a gift. And you know what? Those days are going to show up on my face. I'm going to earn it, stretch marks, right? That people, when we're on our deathbed, we're always praying for another day. But yet, why do you think as women, we have this, like, this stretch? I want more time. I want more time with my family. I don't want to die. Like, I want to stay healthy for all these reasons. And yet we're so like, ew, age looks gross on me. You can't have both. Why are we not celebrating that we got to have another heartbeat?
I mean, yes. And that's why I'm working hard to reframe so that when I see wrinkles or signs of aging, it's more like, you go, girl, like,
because you don't do that with other people. You're not like, oh my gosh, look at her wrinkles, how hideous.
Yes.
We only do this with ourselves.
Yes. Well, and to be honest, I think there is a part that I've also learned of things that I'm very critical about myself. I do judge in others. So if I am very critical of, like, I'm very aware of signs of aging, or if I'm gaining weight, I am way more aware of it in other people. And what I've also had to learn is usually those things that we judge about others are things we're actually just judging about ourselves, that we feel very insecure about. Because there's other people in the world that don't even see that. They don't even see, like, I've talked to some friends who maybe didn't grow up in a fitness industry or a dance industry or whatever, and they're like, they don't see body shape. They don't see wrinkles. They don't see that stuff. It doesn't even like phase them. Like, we live in a completely different reality based on our past experiences and our programming and these narratives that are running us. And what I think is so cool about life is that anytime we don't like any of those narratives, we can but sometimes it's very hard to change them. It takes some deep work.
It's not simple.
Yeah.
Oh, well, that's not true. It is simple. It's just not easy.
Easy. Yes, that's the word.
Yeah.
Yes.
So how do you find that your story comes through your characters? Because a lot of times when I teach people to speak from stage,
Yes.
there's these 4 different personalities, the personas that they adopt. We go into the warrior and the healer and the visionary and all that. But then I go into this X factor. And someone just today on Instagram called it the Batman syndrome. But positive thing. It's the Batman theory or something like that.
Okay.
And they said when you feel like you need to adopt more confidence, or you feel like you want to be the person already that you're aspiring to become, you adopt your Batman, where you're like, and suddenly you can do everything.
Yes.
Right? You adopt this character. So for your personal story and your personal journey, it's very interwoven with your performances because this
100%.
movie inspired you, and then you performed in the sequel. But I have found the actors that I love to watch most, there's a moment when they stop acting.
Yeah.
Right? Where the character and the person merge and become one. What has that been like for you?
Oh, I mean, I think that is like great acting. Like, I think great actors, when you watch them, you totally don't feel like they're acting at all. Like, they're just so in this, what I believe is this version of themselves. I mean, honestly, on my kind of journey of self-discovery and study of human behavior and acting, we all have all these personalities inside of us. And ultimately, it brings up this phrase that I've struggled with my whole life. There's this phrase that people say, like, oh, just be yourself. And
you're like, who the heck is that?
I've always been like, yeah, like, I don't know who that is. Like, who in that? And especially when you're playing all these different characters and playing with all these different parts and pieces of you, you're very aware that, like, oh, actually, I could be whoever I want to be. So I think what's helped me the most is deciding in life not just to be myself, but to decide who I want to be, and then create very intentional habits, thought process, behaviors, and daily routines that instill that person. Like, if I want to be a courageous person, okay, what kind of habits or what kinds of things or thoughts or books or music would a courageous person listen to? Because that's what I do with characters. If I'm playing a character that is more shy or more timid, I go down this whole path. Okay, like, well, what kinds of thoughts do they have? What kind of past experiences might they have gone through that might have given them these narratives or these stories, or what are their narratives and stories that are driving their show? And so it's been super interesting, this whole concept of we are all the creators, I believe co-creators with this, whatever you believe in, God, higher power, universe, that are co-creating our life. And literally, we can create whatever we want. Like, we can be whoever we want. We can do whatever we want. Obviously, there's different things that feel more authentic or inauthentic to people. But then again, I could argue, like, well, it only feels inauthentic because you haven't done it a bunch of times.
Yeah.
And you're like, if you were to have been the same person, but you grew up in a completely different country, in a different culture,
What would you be?
you would be completely different. And so, and there might be some like things, I do think there are certain, I'm sure, as a mom, your kids came out with these personalities. Like, they just came out with them.
Yeah, I'm like, oh, wow, that's a person.
They're them.
Yeah.
Pretty cool. And so I do think we have these like innate things that make us who we like us, but it is very formidable into whatever we want. And I think it's very dangerous to believe that we're just stuck in one version of ourselves. I've had chapters of life when I was in very deep depressions, and I just started to believe that, like, oh, this is just who I am now. Like, I just sleep all day, and I just eat a lot, and I just struggle with life, and I'm kind of like in this victim mentality, and I have to work really hard to get myself out of that. But if I didn't realize that, like, no, I'm the creator of my life, I can change, I can grow, I can evolve, I can decide to be whoever I want, it would be very easy to get stuck there. And perfect example of this, and how I think playing around with these different parts and pieces of you is so powerful, in the healing journey is it's almost like a really powerful form of meditation. You know, when you do a meditation, the whole concept is to like stop the spinning thoughts and to be in a space where you aren't thinking your regular thoughts. You're kind of in the space of everything and nothingness at the same time.
It's creating.
Yeah. It's like this different space. And so, you know, when you're playing around with characters, you're not thinking any of your same thoughts because you're in a totally different headspace. And so, you know, for example, in like a real time thing, when I was kind of discovering this in life, I was a part of this. I was really close to getting this huge role. It was a big Tyler Perry movie. They flew me out like first class in a bougie hotel in Atlanta. And I was down to like the last couple people for this role. And this callback that I had to do was on stage in this huge audience. And anyways, it was so exciting and powerful and so much energy and adrenaline and nerves. And let's just say that it did not go the way that I had hoped.
Okay, tell us what happened.
Well, I just, you know, I mean, I auditioned fine, but I just afterwards, I was just.
Did you kind of know?
Yeah, I just kind of knew. I was like, I didn't feel good about that. And it sucked. And I was really sad. I mean, I went from feeling like sky high to like so fast. And I just felt so sad. And of course, you know, you gotta like pack your stuff up and you fly back to LA. And you go from this world of like, my whole life is getting changed to like, no, back to square one.
Fun weekend.
Yeah. And so anyways, I just remember getting in an Uber and being so sad, like just so sad. And like, just being like, am I a terrible actress? Like, what am I doing with my life? Do I need to like completely change my whole, like, should I just like go be something else? You know, like just everything.
Yeah.
And then I remembered this concept of how, you know, just playing different versions of yourself or playing to these different characters can be so helpful. And so I remembered this one character I played in another movie called Cold Moon, actually opposite Christopher Lloyd, which was such a huge dream come true. I know, it was amazing.
All-star. So cool.
And Belinda Hale was her name. And she was just this like Southern belle that's just like, so like just the light. Like she was just so much fun. And I remember when I was on set, I literally was the happiest, like because I was playing this version all the time of myself. And so in the Uber, I was like, what if I just was Belinda right now? And so I was like, this guy doesn't know me. And so I just got in the car and I was Linda for that 30 minutes in that car. And I was just talking like this and being like, hey, how do you do? Yeah, I grew up here and I did this. And
no kidding.
And we just had so much fun for that 30-minute Uber ride. And by the end of it, I was like, I feel great.
Wow.
Yeah. It was wild. It was very eye-opening. And it just gave me this, it's like liberating, you know? And I think this comes along with practices of being very grounded in yourself as well, because it can be challenging navigating like, okay, well, if I can be all these different versions, then who am I really? And
I heard Hugh Jackman actually lost his accent because of his practice in other accents and other roles.
Yeah.
He kind of lost himself.
Yeah.
And had to have a coach adopt him and back to the Australian culture. I was like, what would it be like to just be so divergent to get lost?
So I do think it comes with, you know, I think that's why it's so important. You know, and people have asked me before, they're like, okay, wait, you did like a couple like massive, you know, big studio films to Center Stage and Bring It On back to back. And then they're like, how come you didn't like blow up? Like, how come you're not like in way more big, you know, A-list name films? And, you know, when I did Center Stage and Bring It On, I was like 19 and 23 or something. I was very young. And at the time I was like, yeah, not blowing up, you know? But now I am so grateful that didn't happen, because even though I thought I was ready for it, I wasn't ready for it. Wow. Like, I didn't learn all the stuff I know now about how to ground myself, how to have healthy relationships, how to face the darkest parts of myself, how to also embrace the lightest, brightest parts of myself, how to receive love. Because I think that's also a huge problem that our society has, is like we are not actually like letting ourselves receive love. We're pretty good at giving it, but really crappy at receiving it. And what that does to a human life is really interesting.
There's a lot in that sentence.
Yes, a lot in that sentence. And so anyways, I'm just, you know, I think sometimes just in life, you know, we really don't understand it till we can like look backwards. But I am really, really grateful. And I have a lot of compassion for child stars that just get thrown into this crazy this crazy way of living and fame and celebrity that is so hard. And it totally makes sense that's struggle so much because it's rough. But I do think, I'm just so grateful for all the inner growth. And now in this place in my life where I'm like, I don't care about the fame. I don't care about the celebrity. I just really care about, like, I love making movies. I love telling stories that hopefully inspire the world and help elevate people's lives. Because movies have elevated my life so much. And I really want to get back to this thing that you brought up about these different archetypes that we can play. So like, I have all these different archetypes and the different characters that I play. And even when I go on stage or before I do something, so my middle name is Rachele Brooke Smith, right? So Brooke is like kind of my alter ego that, like, when I have to go do something brave, I'm like, all right, Brooke, let's go. Like,
I love that.
This. So I do think, and when I've worked with people and like when we've done different retreats or events, or I love talking to people about, like, find these different characters within you. Like, we all have like the bitch character, the victim character, the hero character, the silly character.
We have a name for who I am when it's that time of the month.
Yes.
Linda.
Yes.
Listen, Linda.
Linda comes up. And I think that's healthy in relationship and just in yourself, like, to call on these different parts. And by the way, like, Beyonce does that, like, she has her name that she does on so many people have these kind of these archetypes that they literally close their eyes, they step into, they have some sort of ceremonial thing that, like,
some ritual.
Deep
breath puts them in there.
Or like a bracelet or whatever, that, like, reminds them, like, I am this version of me now, and I can call on this version of me.
It's like Lightning McQueen. I am speed.
I am speed. Yeah, so I think that's been so helpful.
Do you tour and give that presentation to where you're like the personas? This is you, like, how to do this?
Yeah, I've done different, like, talks and speeches, and we've done different workshops, with Relationship Renegades, where I take people through something I created called the Renegade Flow, which is basically just this immersive experience where I use music and movement and guided meditation and, like, inner child healing and guiding people through while they're in this heightened state with empowering music and mindsets and meditation. Who do they really want to be? Like, what really lights them up? What are these different characters within them? And what would it look like to live from those places? And then getting to kind of, with our eyes closed in a safe space, even, like, dance like that. Okay, so if you're like your brave character,
that excites me.
Whatever their name is, what would it look like if they were on the dance floor right now? Like, what would it look like to go, like, as the silly character, if you were to meet someone new, like, what would that look like? Okay, now go do it. So it's a lot of, I think for us and all the stuff we do, especially with Relationship Renegades, it's about play. I think play is very underrated.
It's a lot. It's, I know if experiences for me, I have a friend who wears bright colors. He has a bright colored phone case. He's one of my favorite people, and he doesn't know this, but he's my mentor for play.
Yes.
I have this inner thought. I'm like, what would Ryan do right now to make this really fun?
Yes.
And it's why do we lose this as grown-ups? Like, it's been hammered out of us. This glorification of busy.
Yes,
becomes the replacement of play. And I'm like, what the heck?
Yeah. I mean, I think oftentimes, it does get beaten out of us. It's like the kids that we grow up, when we come into this world, we are full of life and curiosity and wonderment and play.
You know how often my daughter makes a friend on the playground?
I know.
She brings them over to me. She's like, hey, this is my new friend. I'm like, what's her name? I'm like, I don't know. We're just going to play. I'm like, yeah. Do that anymore? Can you imagine if I, like, went to a coffee shop? Hey, this is my new friend. I don't know their name, but we're going to go get some coffee. Yeah.
But, like, how cool would it be, like, if we did go up to strangers and just say, like, hey, you want to go play today? You want to go, like, I mean, maybe we would use a play, but
we should try this. We should take a camera to a playground and
just see, or a coffee shop, or just, like, have these, just inviting more play and silliness. And so one of our favorite kind of morning routines that we have, because Amelia and I have both been in, like, wellness and biohacking, there were chapters where it was very rigid. Like, it was very like, okay, I wake up early. I have my morning routines. I do my workout. I do my meditation. I do my journaling. I do my, it's very like, and so
going school.
Yeah, it was like, man, this is stressful. Like,
it's supposed to be
like, this is giving me anxiety. And so
this is why I'm doing this.
We started this kind of thing that just happened naturally, but It's called morning shenanigans. And so the rule is, as soon as you wake up, and you can also just do this throughout the day. We often end up doing that sometimes. But I love waking up with this element of joy and play and silliness. So the rule is you be as ridiculous as possible. And the first person to break, like the first person to laugh, loses. And so the whole goal is like to make the other person laugh without you laughing. And I mean, honestly, my improv game has elevated so much since doing this. Because Emilio is actually so good at it. Like he can just deadpan, like keep a straight face. But it is hilarious. And now we've gotten so good at it, sometimes it just like lasts forever. And we're like, all right, but we have to like start the day.
It's 2 p.m. Yeah, that's good.
But I do think that, I mean, there is a time and place, like when we're going through hard things, like we got to like go in and do the deep stuff. And it is, you know, pretty serious, but adding and being open, I think it's this concept of like, even being able to access fun again. I've met so many people. I'm like, when was the last time you actually like had fun? Like, are you enjoying your life? And so, you know, for me before, where I was so driven on achievement, I've completely rewired that. And now I'm so driven on enjoyment. And that has just made my life so much better. Also, like my health so much better, you know, especially when I'm like, and that's a big rewire too, because, you know, stress ages us. So
Big time.
one of the biggest like anti-aging things that is free, is just enjoying life more.
I dialed this in. I'm currently in the middle of that, like enjoyment versus achievement and all of that. And I have noticed and become very sensitive to, I can feel a cortisol infusion when it happens. And I can feel a serotonin infusion when it happens.
Yes.
And I'm just like, whoa.
Yes.
I just felt myself gain 5 pounds. I need to go have some fun. Like, what just happened to me? I love everything you're doing. I love, like, we got to chat for like 20 minutes at the X room. And I sitting here with you, I have just fallen in love so much more with who you are and what you're up to. And you and Emilio are just like, I want to play more in your sandbox.
Yes, please. I'd love to play more.
We're going to play this Sunday. But where do people find you? If they want to get in with involved with Relationship Renegades, if they want to know about your films coming out, if they want to learn more about when your next speech is happening with your storytelling and your persona, how do they find you?
I think the best place is my website. It's just rachelebsmith.com. So it's RachelebSmith.com. It kind of links to all my social media. I'm really active on Instagram at rbrooksmith and at relationship.renegades.
Okay, so we'll put all of those in the chat and in the comments and in the podcast. Richard's on top of it. He's like, I got you. We'll put all those in there. But I'm so excited for what you're doing. It lights me up. Like, I want to have my children bypass so much of the darkness that we had to go through. Not without suffering. Like, I want them to learn the struggle.
Yes.
But I want them to pass through the trauma. And there's very few people that I recommend to my kids, and you're one of them. So thank you for being who you are.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me and for the work that you guys are doing. Like, it's just so beautiful. We need so much more examples of healthy relationships. I think that is what changes. Like, if it wasn't for the 1 or 2 healthy, playful, supportive relationships that I had met on my journey, like, I wouldn't even know it existed. I wouldn't have had a standard of like, that's what I want. I'm not going to give up till I find it.
Yeah.
And so I think the best way we can all help each other is just embodying it.
Amen.
Yeah.
Amen. Well, thank you, Rachel, for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
We're going to have a part 2, guys. We need to have Emilio on here.
Let's
so
have a part 2.
Stay tuned. If you're not already subscribe, because that's coming up probably in the next month or so. I'm like, we got to get these guys in the studio.
Yes. And for the 2 new films I have coming out in the fall, that they're coming to one of the VIP private screenings tonight of Alien Country.
And it's going to be awesome.
Yes.
Okay. We'll see you next time on the Marianne Hickman Show. Hey, thanks for watching. Go ahead and hit the subscribe button. And of course, make sure you text me just directly with whatever questions you have about building your brand. You want to build your signature keynote presentation. Maybe you're at the stage where you need to get your ebook out and you need to help writing that. Let's do it all. Whatever you have questions with, wherever you're stuck, just text me 801-509-5495. Let's get this underway and make you some money with your message.